Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're here for our mock draft 5.0 for your Jacksonville Jaguars. I'd originally planned to wait until draft week to release one final mock draft. I'm going to throw in another one for a couple reasons. One being that it's April, right? We're close to the draft. This is the focus for everyone. And I just finished my big board recently. So there's a lot of players that have been moved around. There's some different names in my top 10 now. And so we're finally starting to get to our final opinions on players. And it gives me a better idea of what I'm going to be looking for on draft day, whether or not it actually happens. But I want to talk you through, who are the top prospects that I'm looking at? Maybe who's Jacksonville actually interested in? What kind of strategy should we take? Where are players going to go? We're going to talk about all that kind of stuff. Then we're going to talk about, what is really a need for this team? What are the long-term needs? And the good news, I can say, well, some of the needs may be very big. There's not a ton of them on this roster. So just to take a look, we've got wide receiver, and this is just the ones I've got highlighted here I would really consider as immediate needs. Yeah, wide receiver was Zay Jones. You're looking for a Z receiver specifically. So it's going to be a faster player, someone who's a good route runner, can get open, move around the formation a little bit. That's ideally the kind of player you want in that role. I also highlight left tackle because, Cam Robinson's contract right now has had no changes, first of all. I think there's a reason for that. Because at the end of the day, if they were to make changes now, they don't have the option, really, to go get a left tackle unless they're okay with sitting them. So I think what Jacksonville is doing, and I may be wrong on this, is I think they're waiting until past the draft just to see, do we end up landing a tackle? Because there's a scenario where tackle is the top of their board when they pick, or maybe if they trade up. And then Cam Robinson, you don't really want to have that renegotiated contract because you don't really get out of it all, right? When they restructured Brandon Scherff, he took a massive pay cut. He went down to, I think, $10 million for this year, but they immediately signed him to a signing bonus to get that done. So that's the other side of it. And if we do that with Cam Robinson, then you got to pay out money to not have him play if you want to get rid of him. So it's not really effective, and I think they're just playing the waiting game there. So that's where they sit with Cam Robinson right now. It's a possibility to move on from him. And realistically, I would say this is probably his last year in Jacksonville. I could be wrong on that for sure. We'll have to see what happens, but there's very much a possibility. And then finally, as far as immediate needs, I also mentioned cornerback here because as much as Ronald Darby is a good starter when he's on the field, Ronald Darby has health issues. He has not played full seasons consistently. And so you need to do something there. You need to get another player, ideally, to be able to start in the future. And you also got Tyson Campbell right now, who's not extended yet. You don't know what's going to happen there right now. So there's a future that's very much in question in the secondary. Now, as far as other needs that you can throw out, I would argue along the defensive line, well, you have four very good starters. You look at the depth behind them. We're talking about Travis Gibson, Roy Robertson-Harris, Tyler Lacey, and Adam Gotsis. It's not a super inspiring group. I think they could absolutely look to add more players there, especially because it's a rotation, right? You're not just going to have the same four guys on the field all the time. If you're playing these 3-4 looks, well, you're going to need another guy out on the field too. And so I think that's definitely going to be a need. You can also consider getting an offensive lineman of the future for the interior. You've got left guard locked up. Center, I would say, based on the guaranteed money, is set for 2 years, although they could move on from Mitch if they want next season. What it means is that they have to pay him effectively $2 million not to play that year, roughly around that number. So there's a little bit of a question there, because then it's a 1-year, $7 million deal. I don't think that's how it turns out. I think he stays for both years. But Brandon Scherff, he's got 1 year left. I don't think he stays past this year. So that's where I see things heading as of now. And then, wide receiver, you could use depth there for sure, but I think you're okay there. That'd probably be the next thing I would argue on this team, and then maybe a kicker, of course, but we're not going to talk about kicker until much deeper into the draft. So that's where your needs lie right now. There's not a ton of things, but there are certain things that are very major. They could be very big problems. And so I think like wide receiver clearly ranks at the top of that list. Now, talking about my big board and how I'm approaching the first round, how we'll approach this. I'm starting to put together my strategy, starting to think about like what teams I want to trade up with for what prospects, who I'm willing to trade up for, who I'm going to stay put for, all that kind of stuff. And so for me, there's 3 players that stand out that I think could realistically fall that I would make a move up for. So you go through the first 3 here. They're not going to be options, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., we heard that the asking price is 3 first-rounders. It's not going to happen. You can debate if that's worth it, and I have no problem with people saying it is, because it probably will be way down the road. But the reality is, if you can hit on your first-round picks, and if you pick really well, especially in this class, which is loaded with talent, you're better off getting 3 first-round players that are really good, rather than trading it all for one guy who's going to be elite, who's going to be great. I just think that's where it gets to be too much, right? 2 first-rounders and change, I can understand that. Once you get to 3, it's a whole different problem there. You've also got, of course, the quarterbacks, who I'm going to skip over. No duh, right? We got Trevor Lawrence here. Now, the 2 players to start that I think you consider moving up for are Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze. Of these 2, I think realistically the one who's available, and I actually think he will be available for the Jaguars, is Rome Odunze. Now, how do I see the first round playing out? That's kind of the big question here that I think determines a lot of this. So just looking at teams and who I think they're going to draft, this is the way I understand it right now. I think you got Caleb Williams going to the Bears. And of course, I want to make it clear, like the way the mock draft simulator plays out, probably not the same way I'm saying or realistically how it goes in real life. That's usually how this goes. But I think Caleb Williams goes first. I think Jaden Daniels goes to Washington. It just feels like everything is pointing to that being the pick. And I think at 3, that New England ends up moving out of the pick. Like they move back with the Vikings, who send them a big offer. They go get Drake May there. That's their guy. They've clearly loaded up to be able to make that offer. We also heard that New England was willing to take 3 first-rounders to move out of the pick. That was their asking price. So it might be a little more, it might be a little less. Going to be something around there. I think Minnesota's willing to pay that price. I think Arizona clearly goes with Marvin Harrison Jr. Pick number 5 is where it gets interesting, right? Because we've heard Malik Neighbors, and I'll just be straight. Like, it should be the pick. This would be the best pick they could take. They get a blue chip prospect falling into their lap. That's the way I'm going. However, people I've listened to from the Chargers, things I've heard from their organization, actually make it sound like Joe Walt is indeed going to be the pick at number 5, which a little shocking to me, right? Because they have a left tackle right now in Rashawn Slater, who's very good. And so someone's got to move over to the right side if they do that, but they've been very well pushing the offensive line to people. Maybe it's a shocker too. Maybe they go like J.C. Latham and pick someone that you don't really think's supposed to be going here, but this might be the first selection where I think things could get a little crazy, right? But realistically, it should be Neighbors. I just don't know if everything's pointing that direction at this point. Now, number 6 with the New York Giants, I think if McCarthy falls, and I think he does, because you have the Vikings moving up here, you have Marvin Harrison Jr. going off the board, and your teams that would move up to try to jump the Giants happen to be division rivals of the Chargers, because you're talking about, Denver Broncos, you're talking about the Raiders. The Saints don't have enough capital to do it, in my opinion, and they also need tackle really bad, so they'd kind of be throwing their rookie straight into the fire, so I don't think that happens. And the Giants are the perfect situation for McCarthy to go develop right now, because you probably want to give him at least a year before he starts. Daniel Jones has a year left. New York can pick McCarthy here. They don't got to give up extra stuff. They develop him for a year. Try to build around them. They've done some nice things to add, such as the Brian Burns trade. Obviously, that's defense, but still, like, I think the Giants have done things to improve, and they can make a really good selection for their future there. That's what I expect to happen. Once you get to the Titans pick, is where it gets interesting. I think if Joe Alt's here, he goes off the board for sure. If Joe Alt goes number 5, I think they go Neighbors at number 7. It could be potentially Rome Odunze. It could even be Olu Fashanu at number 7. I could see those being outcomes too. They have heavily invested at wide receiver. So even with what they said about always choosing the receiver over the tackle if they have similar grades, that might not play out here for all we know. Once he gets pick 8, though, after that point, that's where you start looking to trade up. And so that's a place I'm considering, especially for Malik Neighbors, because I think Neighbors is, for one, a little bit better of a prospect than Rome Odunze. I have him ranked above him. I also have him in that S tier. I think Rome Odunze is super close. I'm teetering on whether he's an A+ or an S for me, but both, incredible players, obviously. Neighbors, I just think fits better because you're looking for that Z, you're looking for the speedy route runner, and Neighbors can do all that. He can go down the field as well. He can extend things vertically. Like, he just feels like a higher upside prospect than Rome Odunze, and I don't buy the off the field crap. So I like Neighbors as the option. With Rome Odunze, I'd consider moving up to 8, but I'm probably willing to spend a bit more to get Neighbors just because I think he's a more logical and better fit for the Jaguars. And if they have a choice between the two, that's the direction I hope they go. But these are kind of the picks where you're starting to think about moving up. It's 8 or 9, and by that point, if no one's moved up to get these players, they're gone to the teams picking there, right? So that's the way I think it plays out. The other player I would consider moving up for, before we hop into this, it's Olu Fashanu. I have him as my 7th overall prospect. I've very much changed my tune on him after, honestly, getting a bit freaked out by the hand size measurements. Olu Fashanu, his strengths, the things he's good at, fit Jacksonville perfectly. And I mean perfectly. Because this guy is maybe not by far, but I think he is clearly the best pass blocking tackle in this class. I don't think there's much of a debate there. Jacksonville is a pass-heavy offense, and while I've talked about wanting to get good run blockers, it's more of an interior offensive line argument. I think Fashanu's better than what people give him in the run blocking department. I think he's a solid player there. He's got to improve, of course, but there's just so much to work with. There's such a massive ceiling, super athletic, just everything about his game screams fit for Jacksonville, and he might fall because of that measurement. That might honestly knock him down, heck, even to pick 17 if we stayed put. But realistically, like, if I'm looking to move up for him, I'm looking at the Raiders pick. Because the Saints clearly need offensive line. You don't know if they're going to go for Shanu, or maybe they go Latham or Fuaga if they're there, or Fuanga is the right way to say it. I don't want to take that risk, right? Like, if I can get my future left tackle, and I have my bookends for a long time, and they're cheap for a long time as well, that's something that I don't know if a single other NFL team has to the extent that Jacksonville has at that point. So that's a great investment, in my opinion, and I'm willing to move up to 13 for that. If that doesn't happen, we're looking at players on the defensive line, I think. I think you're looking all defensive side of the ball, quite frankly. I think Johnny Newton could be a player that falls down there. Fantastic player. I think he would be a phenomenal fit on the interior of this defensive line. Not sure if it happens because Jacksonville is like crazy about the metrics of these players physically, how long are your arms and all that. They care a little too much. But Johnny Newton's a special player, and I think he's a blue chip prospect in this class. So he's someone that I would absolutely love to pick up at 17. And maybe I trade up for him if the board looks really bad, if it's hard to imagine getting a good pick, and he's the one guy left. He might be a player I consider. Dallas Turner might be more of a luxury, but he's a valuable player, right? Very important position, tons of upside, really good pass rusher already, and I don't have many concerns. I've got one thing listed here. I'm sure I could add to that. And I probably will by draft day, but I really like the player. I love what he offers, and he's coming into a great situation. After that, maybe we stay put for Quinyon Mitchell. He is my top cornerback by the slimmest of margins right now, but really good player. He'd be a nice pick at 17. I think once you get past that point, though, I'd consider moving back in this draft. I feel like you can get a better deal doing that. You can pick up more selections. You can still get a really good prospect. But ideally, what Jacksonville needs to do this time, they need to get a blue chip prospect. You need to get one of these top guys, find a way to acquire one. The best case scenario is you're getting one of these receivers. That's what you want to happen at the end of the day. But of course, we got to see how things go. So with those 15 minutes of talking about the draft before we hop in, we're going to go ahead and hop in. We're going to make our picks. I'll talk you through my selections, the players I'd be looking at, and all that kind of stuff. So we'll walk through this kind of slowly. We're going to go to pick 8 here. So yeah, we got all receivers off the board by this point, which is unfortunate. They actually fell past 4 here, but maybe that's the way it goes. I don't think it'll be in this order, but we don't really have an option there at this point. I wouldn't move up to number 6. I think it's too much to spend for Malik Neighbors, honestly. I would rather jump on him if he falls to 8. So we're going to be looking probably at Olufashanu as an option. And if we pick him, it's going to have to be before pick 14. So we'll see what happens here. And we get to pick 13. So Fashanu's still on the board. So as far as top prospects right here, we've got Fashanu at number 7. I need to pronounce that correctly. It's Fashanu, actually. So Fashanu, we got Johnny Newton, and we also got Dallas Turner off the board. And then Quinyon Mitchell's still here. So you've got 2 very good prospects available. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing, especially for this year, is protecting your franchise quarterback, giving him pieces on the offense. And you can even do that in getting an offensive lineman. So I really like the idea of doing that. We're going to get a trade done here. So realistically, what do I think this looks like? I think with the Las Vegas Raiders, you're probably looking at moving number 17. I think it's got to be 96 with that. And you're probably moving 153. And that gets you pretty close here. Maybe you got to throw in a player to sweeten the deal, someone that, maybe they were high on during the draft process that doesn't have much of a role here. Could be that kind of player. But realistically, it's going to be something around this range. And this should get the trade done for us after I do it twice, apparently, because 10% chance happened. So we're up here to number 13. We got Olufashanu sitting here. He's going to be the pick for us. A really good offensive lineman. He's going to be our left tackle of the future in this scenario. I don't know if Jacksonville goes this route in real life. I don't think that'll happen. I think they're probably going to look to move up for receiver. And if that doesn't happen, all bets are off the table. I really don't know what position they go at that point. Maybe cornerback at number 17. But Fashanu would be a fantastic addition because now you got your bookends. You've got Ezra Cleveland locked up for a while. You've got 2 interior players along with that, Mitch Morse and Scherf, that you trust to play on the inside. You have a really good group for what you want to do. So that's going to be our move here. Now, we've also got Cam Robinson, of course, on this team still. So we're going to be looking to maybe consider a trade here. Now, maybe we get a little crazy at this point. Got an idea for you guys. So I've seen some stuff online about Cam Robinson potentially being a fit for the Kansas City Chiefs through a trade. And now that you have Olufashanu on your team, you don't need Cam Robinson. Kansas City does not have a left tackle right now. They've also got a lot of money to work with at this point. Cap space is going up. They got 1 year that they would get out of Cam Robinson in a trade. You've got a hell of a player still sitting on this board. And in fact, the player that was our second option there. which was Johnny Newton, who I have at 8th overall on my big board. I know it's going to cost a bit, but I'm willing, especially considering that this team needs to add more high-end talent rather than just, Jags, just a guy, if you know that saying. They need to add these top-tier players. You're at pick 32 here. You got Kansas City, the 5th-year option on this contract. They need a left tackle. We're going to look at what a trade would cost to move up for Johnny Newton. And it's probably going to be expensive. So we're going to throw in 48. We're moving up 16 spots. You're going to throw in Cam Robinson. We're going to throw in 114. And we're going to throw in a future 4th. And that's going to get this done. Cam Robinson, there's a little bit of money on his contract. I'm sure Kansas City can restructure it. They can get that number down. I think that's going to come at some point this offseason, whether he's here or he's on their team. But we're going to get a deal done here. We're going to get a little crazy. And I think this team needs to be aggressive in the way they handle this draft. This is a phenomenal group of players, and you need to find a way to get as many high-end talents out of it as possible. You got Olufashanu at 13. Now you move up to 32, make a huge splash, move off of your left tackle that you just replaced. Now you're adding Jer'Zhan Newton to the defensive line. They talked about this, with the trenches, trying to reinforce things, get stronger, get good players there. I think you're doing that for the long-term future. You have a really strong interior defensive line. You have more insurance as well for if Devon Hamilton doesn't come back at full strength this next year. I'd feel great about this situation. And in fact, on draft night, this probably would be the best outcome that I can envision. But we'll, of course, have to see if Johnny Newton falls that far. I don't know if that actually happens, but definitely something I'm watching. So that ends up being our first 2 picks. So we're coming up at 116 here. I think I already know who we're going to be looking at for this selection. Now, who might be my highest ranked player at this point? It's going to be between 2 guys. There's Cooper Beebe, who would be your potential right guard of the future, since obviously Ezra's played on the left side. You've also got Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I'm a huge fan of him. He is a slot corner, though. That's the issue. He's said in interviews that's where he prefers to play. Now, he does have experience outside as well, so I think he can play out there if you have to. But you just got Darnell Savage to play slot. You want to draft best player available, of course, right? And it's very close between these 2 prospects. I think this is when you can consider need, right? When you get deeper into the draft, you have similarly rated prospects. You have one guy who you don't really see being able to start for a while. Because Jarvis Brownlee Jr., realistically, I think the earliest he is the set starter and not a backup would be year 3. And that's if you're moving on from Darnell Savage. So you're assuming that's a bad signing. With Cooper Beebe, I think he's taken snaps this year. I will just go ahead and say that. I think he could even play center if you need him to. But after this next season, now you got your Brandon Scherf replacement, and you got your right guard of the future. So that's an easy pick for me here. Now, we've got 5 selections in this draft, and we didn't trade back. I get that. That's definitely a rough part of this. But last year we had 13, right? How many of those players are potential impact players for the Jaguars? You got Anton Harrison. You got Antonio Johnson. Everyone else, I don't see the path to them becoming that kind of player. So trading up, back into the first, getting another great player, spending a bunch of your extra capital, going from 8 picks to 5, I don't have a problem with it one bit. So I like this for the Jaguars. I would be jumping up and down personally. Maybe you won't, but this draft would be a home run to me as far as how things could go. Now we're up here at 212. Might throw out a new name here. I've got 2 guys I would consider here if we're not going kicker. And I'm not sure there's a kicker that's good enough to where I'm going to pick them this early. I think it's very debatable. And you've got a few names you could be looking at. You could look at Will Reichard. You could look at Joshua Carty. Two guys I think are very close prospects. But the two people I go to here, one is Tanner McLachlan, who the problem is he's coming in as someone who would barely take any snaps, but I think would be a really nice tight end 3, and I think he could even start for a team if he has to. The other guy I'm looking at, and someone I just started scouting today, actually just an hour ago, was Joshua Cephas. Cephas is one of the best PFF grades out of this last year. Super productive player, as you can see by the yards as well. He has really good size that he plays with, but he's just not refined enough of a prospect at this point. So very low on my big board, right? But we're talking about the 200s here. He's 23 years old. He's got really good size, though. He's 6'2", 191 pounds. Smaller hands, but really good catcher. Someone who catches basically everything thrown his way. Even if it's a contested catch, he can come down with it. He's got solid arm length. Not great, right? But solid. Your issues with him are going to come down to the top speed. It's very apparent on film. He doesn't have a final gear. And it feels like at times maybe he's not playing 100%. He's not going with full urgency all the time. But these are things I'm not worried about as much when we're talking about a 6th-round pick. He has all the skills that you need to be really good at the NFL level. You can even see he has some explosion. He beat out Josh Cowing in the 10-yard split, for example. So really good stuff there. He's got experience across the formation as well. He does really well after the catch. Consistently saw him breaking tackles, finding a way to extend plays. Of course, just lacking that final gear to his speed. So he's sitting here for us at 212. I think it's a phenomenal option, and you need depth in this wide receiver room. That's obviously the clear miss of this draft, right? You're not getting a receiver. You're just getting Joshua Cephas, who is a receiver, but you're not talking about a starter realistically. So we are going to draft him. I think he is arguably the best player on the board. Maybe Tanner McLachlan's sitting there at 236. We'll see. I kind of doubt it. But ultimately, I think this is a fine pick, and he actually is. So you could go with McLachlan here. You could also go with the kicker. I'm going to go with Tanner McLachlan. I'm a big fan of his. I think he could be a starting tight end if he has to be. He's actually my tight end 2 in this class, but I'm going to be straight with you. It doesn't mean much when he's ranked like 96th on my big board. I just don't really like the prospects outside of Brock Bowers. So Tanner's going to be the pick. So 5 selections, right? But you look at the selections we made. We got 2 incredible prospects right off the bat. We got our left tackle of the future, and we got interior defensive linemen that we can rotate with Devon Hamilton and Eric Armstead. Really solid pick, and you can see it's an A+ because this guy is ranked very high on their big board, and in fact, that big board ranking is the exact same that I got. Talking about what you give up, I think this is a realistic trade package that you could see. I think Kansas City has the money to be able to take it on. And your 4th-round picks, it sucks you lose it next year. Too bad, so sad. You're getting a great player. You're getting what I think is a blue-chip prospect. You lose 114, not the end of the world, right? You got to think about who this team has drafted as well in that range. What kind of prospects are on the board? You can hit on those picks, but you could also miss on them very easily. So I'm not worried about moving all that. As far as moving up to, 13th overall, it works great here because, especially consider your next highest ranked player you were able to trade up for after that. I think it's a good deal for you. You don't give up a crazy amount to go up and get him. It's probably a fair trade. I think that's about what you'd see in real life. Maybe 212s thrown in, something like that just to sweeten it up a little bit. But I think that's pretty close to what it's going to look like, especially when there's so many good players from 10 to 30 in this class. So I really like these trades. 2 great players, 1 on each side of the ball. You protect your franchise quarterback. You get stronger on the pass rush, which is how you win championships. You win it through the trenches. You get your right guard of the future. Then you're getting really strong depth pieces with your picks in the 200s. So I'm a huge fan of this. I'm thrilled I was actually able to get these players. I did not think this was going to happen, but if this kind of stuff happens on draft day, you got to get aggressive. You see what these other teams are doing in the division. If you want to have a shot, you got to make moves like this. So I'm definitely a fan of doing something like this. We'll see how it plays out on draft day, of course. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Happy Josh Allen Day. Just got signed. I'm recording this like a couple hours after doing my last video on that. Really excited about it. Got a bright future here in Jacksonville with a lot of blue chip prospects at some very important positions. Hopefully we can add some more this offseason in the draft. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Let me know how you think I did. And finally, go Jags.